request of a friend, I wanted to come in and make a video about mitosis, cellular reproduction. Basically, the concept of the cell cycle, cells dividing, making copies of themselves. But when I started thinking about the topic and how I wanted to explain it, it kind of got me thinking about what is life? What makes us living organisms? What is different about every living organism? For example, we know that a human and an ant are both living organisms. We know that a human and a squid are both living organisms, but yet we are so different. What about, what makes us different? We're both living entities on this planet. We're both, we both do what we can to stay alive on a daily basis. I should say all three of us, but yet, you don't need to be a scientist to take a look at all three of us sitting next to each other and realize that a human, an ant, and a squid are very, very different organisms. Then even further, what separates us from a rock or dirt? What makes us alive? Why are we, what makes us so different, but yet have the one common factor, life? What makes these different, but yet they have a common factor. They're not alive, all right? But yet it's interesting, though, how even though, we're alive and rocks and dirt aren't, how much we need each other, all right? And, this is a question that's been asked for a long time. Philosophers love to talk about this kind of stuff. But this is something that science can definitely, can and has answered. One thing you folks might think about is, okay, how about organic versus inorganic? When I ask students this question, this is something I hear a lot. They'll say, well, humans are organic, living organisms are organic, whereas a rock and dirt aren't. Okay, which, that's a good way to think. Because when you hear organic, you think carbon. Okay, carbon-based molecules, carbon-based living organisms. Okay, versus inorganic is, non-carbon based. Okay, which is good. That, like I said, that's a good way to think. Carbon versus non-carbon based. But if you take a look at a protein, for example, okay, a protein, a carb, or a fat. Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats are all carbon based. But are proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, are they alive? Are they living? Does making them organic mean that they're alive? No, of course not. These are just products of living organisms. We produce these all the time. Okay, we produce proteins, to drive our metabolism for structural purposes, for reproductive purposes. Proteins have such diverse functions. Same thing with carbohydrates. We use carbohydrates for energy. We use carbohydrates for structural purposes again. What do you think an ant's exoskeleton is made out of? Fats. Fats, us as humans, we utilize fat for energy storage to keep us alive. It does help us insulate heat. Arctic animals utilize fat to stay very, very warm, during those harsh, cold conditions. All right. But are these living entities that sustain life on their own? Of course not. Okay. They're not. They're, like I said, they're just products of living entities. They're products that are produced for the purpose of maintaining and sustaining life and creating life as well. Versus inorganic, non-carbon based, basically you're thinking of salts and minerals, metals, okay, those aren't living organisms. So then the question is, what separates, so organic and inorganic does not separate, is not the key factor that separates living versus non-living, all right? What it really comes down to is, to really answer the question of life, is it comes down to one thing. Cells. Cells are what make us living organisms. Cells are what make us alive, living creatures. Cells are the driving force that give us life. All right. Cells make proteins. Cells make fats. Cells make carbohydrates, and cells burn them and break them down. All right. Cells are the smallest, what we call functional units. Well, not small. They are the functional units of life. functional units are basically the smallest parts of a machine, the smallest working parts of an organism or a machine that gives function. Okay? And cells are what give us function. All right? If you take a look at our hierarchy of organization, all living matter, or all matter, I should say, not living matter, starts out as atoms. Okay, we start out as different atoms. Okay, the smallest forms of matter, and then basically we start combining atoms together. And then once we start combining atoms, we start to form molecules and compounds. Okay, great. So we start joining different atoms together: carbon atoms, hydrogen atoms, oxygen atoms. Okay, and we can make water. We can make carbon dioxide. We can make proteins, okay, out of amino acids. We can make fats out of, all fats they're just long hydrocarbon chains. That's all they are, okay, for energy storage. So molecules and compounds. But again, are these living? No, they're not alive. So then, once you start slapping molecules together, then we form organelles. Okay, we can start to build organelles. All right, and what organelles are not necessarily parts per se, but they're individual units of cells. All right, because once you start putting organelles together, then you form the ever so dynamic cell. And when you think of an organelle, you think of when you think of an organelles, you think of a nucleus. Okay, you think of endoplasmic reticulum, whether it's rough ER or smooth ER. You think of a Golgi complex, a mitochondrion. All right, you might think of lysosomes or peroxisomes, or free-floating ribosomes within the cytoplasm. You might think of microtubules, okay, a cytoskeleton, a plasma membrane. That's not an organelle, but it's the outer border of the cell. All right. So basically, so individual organelles, again, what they are, they're just little containers, and different organelles contain various amounts of enzymes. And as you know, enzymes are the catalysts that drive chemical reactions. Okay, whether it's for building molecules or breaking down molecules. And then, basically, you've got a mitochondrion. Mitochondrion are used to, their main purpose is to generate ATP, generate cellular energy. Okay, because a cell performs work, and anything that performs work needs energy. All right, and the main source of fuel, which I like to refer to as like putting gasoline in your car. The main source of fuel for cells is ATP. They convert fats and carbohydrates into ATP. Can do it with proteins as well, but it takes a lot more work to do so. So now, what good? Okay, so that's great. We all need energy, but what good does an individual organelle does if there's nothing to supply the energy with? Or nothing to supply the energy for, I should say. I'm sorry. What good is a nucleus if there's nothing to command? Because the nucleus is where you store genetic material within the cell, DNA. All right, and DNA is used to make proteins. Okay, and you have ribosomes and rough endoplasmic reticulum. So then you use this nucleus, to send out messenger RNA to these ribosomes, whether they're free ribosomes in the cystole or ribosomes attached to the rough ER. And then you make proteins. All right? And then, in some cases, you may need to modify those proteins. So they go to the Golgi. And then those proteins are then packaged and through a complex process called exocytosis are shipped out of the cell for whatever purpose it may be. These proteins may be produced out in just a free ribosome. And then as a result, just utilized by the cell itself. So these individual organelles alone are not enough to sustain life. But when we take these organelles and put them together and organize them to form, we organize them around, within the borders of a cell membrane, and put them in a fluid which we call the cystole, or which is the fluid of the cytoplasm, the inside of the cell. All right, and we take all that machinery and we pack it together like that, and we form a cell. Now we have a living entity. We have life. Okay, we have life, and then these cells can then do what they do. Cells are just little factories. They're little machines that generate protein. That's the main job cells do. Just different amounts, different kinds of protein. That's what life revolves around. Okay? We produce different proteins to drive metabolic reactions. So then we can go more complex from there. Okay, then once we start putting two or more cells together, we'll start to form tissues. Not just two or more cells, two or more different types of cells. All right? And then you start to see some diversity. So then you'll see these different cells making different products, different proteins, different arrangements of proteins, different molecules. All right, which will in turn start to make that tissue unique. And then you start to combine two or more different tissues together, and you get organs. You get these individual organs that are still made out of cells, different kinds of cells that have their specific functions, like a heart. That has cardiac muscle within it. That has these electrically active autorhythmic cells in it as part of its conduction system. That has connective tissue around the outside of it. Called the pericardium. Then we start putting organs together and we get organ systems. We have 11 different organ systems in the body that have various, they have their own unique individual functions, but yet at the same time, even though they independently function, or I should say they independently function, they have their own unique functions, they still need each other. Alright? Every organ in the body needs blood, needs oxygen. Cells need oxygen to drive their metabolism. And as a result, where there's metabolism, we have to get rid of waste products. We need blood to circulate all that around to where we need it to go. We need lungs to excrete the waste. We need kidneys to excrete the waste. We need to fuel the fire of the cell. We need to eat, so we need the digestive system. All right, we need the lymphatic system to help protect all the cells of the body from getting sick. All right, and if a pathogen does get in us, we need to use that system to kill whatever it is that's invading our body. We need muscles to move so we can get to the food sources to keep our cells and our bodies alive. Okay, we need bones for these muscles to attach to. We need the nervous system to regulate all of this activity. Alright? I mean, this is the complex human machine. But it all begins, life begins, then I forgot to mention reproductive system. We wouldn't have an organism, we wouldn't have life without reproduction. Okay? And then we put the organ systems together, and then we have the organism. And then, which is us, the human that you guys think about. And then we have the organism, and then not only, we can take this a step higher, and we'll take a look at populations. I mean, how many of you think you can survive without ever seeing a human again in your life? Or maybe another animal? How long do you think you can survive without contact with your own species? Some people may last longer than others, but eventually you're going to need to have contact with humans, whether for basic life-sustaining needs, or such as getting food, groceries, help fixing something, or maybe something just as simple as psychologically you need to have contact with people. Okay, but in the end, like I said, if you want to break it down to what life really is, this is life. The cell. And in order to truly understand and appreciate a complex topic such as anatomy and physiology, this is something you